Hello, and welcome to another edition of Ask the Professor, where we respond to your questions on political philosophy, on economics, on culture, on current events, on history, the trends, and the historical figures. All those things that matter to us as we try to understand ourselves and live well together in society.
Now, Ron would like to know, what do you have against Thomas Jefferson?
Ooh, there's a long list of things there. And that, again, might seem surprising because Jefferson's up there in that pantheon, except for people who totally despise dead white European males. You know, he's up there with Washington and who else would they put up? Lincoln, I guess they'd put up there among the really great American presidents. Jefferson was the philosopher-statesman. Somebody once at a glittering White House dinner said it was the most distinguished intellectual assemblage there since Jefferson had dined alone. But Jefferson, although he was a passionate theoretical advocate of liberty and did the cause some good, was a hypocrite. He was actually a bad president. He was an ineffective president. He made a lot of rash judgments, but he was at bottom a hypocrite on critical matters of morality and nowhere more than on the issue of slavery. And in my view, that makes him a bad man. Because when he was young, in Notes on Virginia, Jefferson was against slavery, though he also revealed himself as an appalling bigot. And one of the things that he said was wrong with slavery is that it taught children the habit of tyranny. By watching their parents mistreating fellow human beings who were slaves, as worse almost than beasts of burden, they learned to be brutal and callous. And yet, as an adult, he kept slaves. He had a slave mistress. He had children by a slave mistress, and yet he called them subhuman. Can you get more hypocritical than that? It's hard for me to imagine. And later in life, after he'd been president, a rich young Virginian named Edward Coles came to him and said, "Mr. Jefferson, I have a proposition to make to you. I would like to suggest that we both free our slaves in a dramatic public gesture." He said, "I'm a rich man. If I were to give up this much of my property, people would notice. They'd say something. But you're Thomas Jefferson. You wrote the Declaration of Independence. You were president. You founded the University of Virginia. This would be a stunning blow against this institution." And Jefferson turned him down. He said, "No, we cannot. It is not safe to free our slaves." And you know what Coles did? He freed us anyway, and he took them up to the north where they could be free. And he later became governor of Illinois. Jefferson failed this critical test and many others. Now, as president, he also did stupid things like take far too favorable a view of revolutionary France and drift into war with Britain, more or less on behalf of Napoleon. What's worse, he didn't prepare for the conflict. He blundered into the War of 1812 without arming the United States. There are many other things I could point to that he did wrong. He was a bad, sloppy, frivolous, careless president. But when you get right down to it, I told you the story about Jefferson and Coles. You know what George Washington did about slavery? In his will, he freed his slaves, except some who'd come in as part of his wife's dower that he didn't legally have the power to free. After he died, his wife freed them. If every American president had acted on the critical subject of slavery the way Washington did, the peculiar institution, the repellent institution, would have died out. There would have been no Civil War. There would have been no long, bitter history of segregation and problems into the present day based on this ghastly denial of the rights of so many Americans. Instead, the nation did follow Jefferson's lead, and that is the thing that I most dislike about Thomas Jefferson. There was much that was wrong with him. He didn't manage his affairs properly. When he died, he had massive debts. He was full of theoretical virtue, but he lived a life of personal, practical, and political vice. And the worst one of all, to have a slave mistress and yet declare that blacks were unfit for freedom, is such a repellent stain on his character that I say nothing can ever remove it.
All right. And you don't mean that in a good way. I get it. All right. Thanks, folks. If you would like to play along and ask your question of the professor, the URL on your screen will take you to a page where everything is explained. Thanks, and see you next time.